How to negotiate as a freelancer using Business English. As a freelancer, strong negotiation skills are crucial for getting fair compensation and profitable projects. Unlike regular employees, freelancers don't have set salaries and must negotiate rates independently for each client. Being able to negotiate firmly is essential for success. Without it, you risk undervaluing yourself or accepting unfair deals. Skilled negotiators can command higher rates in line with their expertise. In this lesson, we'll cover 11 freelancer negotiation tips with phrases. Now, you might be unsure how to apply these phrases to a conversation, but don't worry, I'll be showing you 3 example negotiation conversations in this lesson. And before we dive in further, don't forget to check out the free ebook on our website. The link is below. Also, you can practice what you've learned with a website activity. Once again, you'll see the website link below this video. Let's start off with our first tip. Do your research. And this means checking industry surveys, freelance job sites, and talking to colleagues for opportunities. Let's look at some example phrases which show why doing your research is so important, and we'll start off with phrases for justifying your price following research. The typical rate for this type of work is $30 based on my research. From surveying other freelancers in this field, the going rate is $25 to $30 per hour. Based on data from leading industry sources, the standard rate for this work is $20 to $30. Having researched rates on freelance job boards, the average pay for this type of project is $27 per hour. Our second tip is to be confident and assertive and enter discussions with conviction. Don't hesitate or sound unsure, and set firm deadlines. Let's look at some example phrases for demonstrating confidence and assertiveness when setting your rate. My rate for a project of this scope is $40. And our next phrase. Based on my background and experience, my rate for this work would be $35 per hour. My rate is non-negotiable at $25 for this project. Let's look at confidence and assertiveness when setting a time frame. In order to reserve time in my schedule, I will need a commitment from you by January the 25th. And another example phrase. My policy is that I can hold a spot open for up to 10 days before I must open it up to other clients. I will need a firm commitment on rates and project scope by the end of next week in order to proceed. Let's look at confidence and assertiveness when having requirements in advance. I'll need the contract signed before booking your project into my schedule. To ensure I can prioritize this in my schedule, I require 25% deposit up front before beginning work. And so we've learnt some super useful phrases there in terms of confidence and assertiveness, and you can use these in writing, you can use them over the phone or in a video conference or face to face. Now moving on, we have our third tip. It's to aim high. As a freelancer, you must aim high. Quote high to allow room to negotiate and have a minimum rate in mind. Let's see some example phrases for aiming high. My hourly rate for this type of work starts at $60. I would quote $600 for this project based on the estimated time and effort required. I cannot accept less than $215 for this project, given my experience and skills. Our fourth tip is to justify your rate. Reference those specific expertise areas, your skills, and your experience to back up your rate. Let's look at those example phrases for justifying your rate. Given my 10 years of experience in this field, I believe $27 per hour is a fair rate. Considering the level of skill and expertise this project requires, my rate of $48 is appropriate. Our fifth tip is to ask questions. So you can ask about budget range, decision deadlines, and if there's room to compromise. Let's look at those phrases. Phrases when asking questions. What is the typical budget for a project of this size and scope? Is there any flexibility in that hourly rate? What is the scope for negotiation on the price? When specifically do you expect to have a decision made by? Moving on at number 6, it's to develop a formal quote. And this is really important. It's about taking time to provide a comprehensive written quote after an initial call, an initial meeting, or written dialogue, so you can confirm they receive it and be willing to negotiate a timeline or scope, but not your rates ideally. Let's look at those phrases. Phrases for developing a formal quote. When telling the client you will provide a formal quote. Let me put together a full project quote and get back to you next week with details on scope and pricing. Providing a formal quote when asking what information they need in the quote. What specific elements should I include in the proposal to help you make a decision? Developing a formal quote when giving a timeline. I can give you a detailed quote with pricing and timelines by the end of the week. Developing a formal quote when sending a written quote. As discussed, please see the attached proposal for the website redesign project. It outlines the scope, deliverables, timeline, and my proposed rates. Developing a formal quote when asking to set up a call. I've sent over the quote. Let's set up a call to review it together and answer any questions you may have. Developing a quote when asking for confirmation that they received it. Just wanted to check if you received the proposal I sent over last week. Looking forward to discussing. Developing a quote when following up if no response. Checking in on the quote I provided last Monday. Please let me know if you have any other questions or need any clarification. Developing a quote when demonstrating flexibility on small details. I'm open to tweaking certain aspects like the timeline if needed. When standing firm of rates, developing a quote phrases. I cannot compromise on the proposed rate, given the effort involved. The rate I have provided is fixed and not open to further discounts. Let's now move on to tip number 7, which is to be flexible, so you can give discounts for buying more or committing long term, and you can also bundle services. Let's look at some example phrases to ensure flexibility. For example, I could offer a 10% discount if you contract me for at least 20 hours per month. We could settle on a flat rate of $215 for the entire project, but revisions would be limited to 3 rounds within that price. I can prioritize your project and start right away if you are able to increase the budget by 15%. So some great phrases there, and let's move on to our 8th tip, which is don't undervalue yourself. Be willing to say no to low offers. Know your worth. Let's look at those phrases. Phrases to ensure that you don't undervalue yourself. I'm afraid $18 per hour is below my normal rate for this kind of work. While I appreciate the offer, I could not complete the project for less than $720. I must decline any rate lower than $42 for this work. Our 9th tip is to keep negotiating so you can make counter offers. You can keep pushing forward towards a fair rate. Let's look at some example phrases here. Phrases to keep negotiating. I propose $32 per hour. Does that work within your budget? Would you be willing to increase the rate to $32? Perhaps we could find a middle ground at $25 per hour. Would that work for you? Our number 10 tip is to know when to walk away. Walk away when negotiations stall or rates are unfair. It's as simple as that. Let's look at those phrases. Phrases for walking away. I'm sorry, but I cannot accept less than $250 for this project. I don't think I can make this project work within your budget constraints. Unless you can increase the rate to $24, I will have to walk away from this project. Number 11, our final tip, it's about concluding negotiations. So you get all the details in writing before starting work. This tip is essential. Let's look at those phrases for concluding negotiations. Does this hourly rate and estimated total price work for you? Shall we move forward with this agreement at $22 per hour? If you are agreeable at $22 per hour, I can send over a contract to formalize. Could you confirm this in writing so we can finalize the agreement? We've now learned all the tips and phrases. Let's proceed to our first negotiation conversation. The scenario is a freelance web developer negotiating with a potential client on an e-commerce website project. Look out for the phrases we've learned in the text in yellow type. I'm looking to hire a web developer to build an e-commerce site for my small business. Based on my research, the typical rate for an e-commerce site is $75 to $100 per hour. Given my expertise with e-commerce platforms like Shopify, my rate would start at $90 per hour for a new site. What budget do you have in mind? I was hoping to keep costs down, so I'm looking to pay around $50 to $60 per hour. Is there any room to negotiate your rate? I'm afraid $60 is below my minimum rate for a complex e-commerce build. However, I could offer a 10% discount if you contract me for at least 120 hours over 3 months. That would bring my rate down to around $81 per hour. Even $81 per hour is still quite high for me. I really can't go over 7,000 total for the project. I understand, however, that rate properly reflects the time and expertise needed for a quality e-commerce site. Perhaps we could find a middle ground at $85 per hour. Would that work for you? I'm sorry, but $85 per hour is still beyond my budget. I may need to look for another developer that fits my price range, but please let me know if you reconsider. I cannot go below $85 per hour for an e-commerce project of this scale. Thank you for your time, but unless you can increase the rate to $85, I will have to walk away. Please keep me in mind if your budget changes for this project. So that's a great example of a conversation using the negotiating skills, the tips, and also some wonderful phrases there. Now let's proceed to our negotiation 2 conversation, and the scenario is a client looking to hire a freelance graphic designer to create branding assets for their new startup company. Once again, look out for those phrases we've learned in the text in yellow type. We need a graphic designer to create branding assets for our new company. What are your rates for something like our logo, letterhead, and brand guide? For comprehensive brand identity work, my rate starts at $75 an hour. Given my branding expertise and the strategic work involved, that's my base rate. What budget do you have in mind? We were hoping to keep it around $50 an hour to be cost effective. Is there any flexibility on your rate? I offer discounted packages for larger projects and could do $65 an hour if you contract me for at least 60 hours over 2 months. I also offer volume discounts and capped revision rounds. That could work. $65 an hour with just 1 round of revisions included would fit our budget. That sounds fair. Shall we move forward with an agreement at $65 an hour with 1 round of revisions for a minimum 60 hours over 2 months? I can send over a contract to formalize. Yes, that works for us. I'm excited to get started on this branding project. Wonderful. I'll get the contract sent over today so we can get this agreement confirmed in writing. Looking forward to working with you on this project. And that's the end of negotiation conversation 2. Let's proceed to our third and final negotiation conversation. The scenario is a client reaches out to a freelance social media manager about handling their Instagram account. Once again, look out for those phrases we've learned in the text in yellow type. Let's go. We need help improving our brand's Instagram presence. What are your rates for social media management? Based on average rates, social media services start around $50 per hour. With 5 years' experience growing Instagram followings, my rate is $75 per hour for this work. What budget do you have? We were hoping to pay around $50 per hour to be cost effective. Is there any flexibility on your rate? While I aim for affordability, $50 is below my minimum given the expertise this work requires. I could offer 10% off to a 3-month contract for at least 10 hours per week, bringing the rate to $67.50 per hour. I think we could make $67 per hour work. That's great. Before finalizing, I'd suggest I put together a detailed proposal outlining the full scope, strategy, and estimated costs for you. I can get it to you early next week. A proposal with examples of your work, detailed costs, and timelines would be great. Perfect. I'll get that sent over within a few days, and then we can discuss the details together. Once you approve, we can move forward to formalize the agreement in writing. I look forward to partnering on your Instagram presence. And that's the lesson, how to negotiate as a freelancer using Business English covered. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to test yourself and take the free drag and drop activity on our website. And if you like this content, then please like and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next lesson.